Yasas, kalispera. Good afternoon, my dear friends. I'm Elena, and this is Made with Yiayia. Today we're going to make something so Greek and so traditional. Yes, if you guessed it, moussaka. Oh, the most delicious meal that you can make for your family. Let's start cooking. Opa! So you want to make sure you have a nice big surface. We have all our vegetables washed and dried. I've got my potatoes in here. The traditional way of making moussaka is actually frying all these veggies and potatoes and then you layer it. But 30 years ago, when I had a piece of moussaka from a friend that made it, I felt like I was eating a bowl of oil because it all just seeped right out. So it was just way too oily. So when I was chatting with another friend of mine, Nikki, we thought, how can we make this healthier? So what I'm going to show you today is the recipe that I have been making for over 30 years. My family love it, my friends love it, and this is how you're going to do it. First thing, we're going to put a little bit of olive oil in our main baking dish. Probably about a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons, just enough to coat the bottom of your pan. In this 9x13 baking dish, what we're going to do is put our sliced potatoes. This is the first process that we're going to start with. So I have my potatoes that I washed. And you want them to be a little thin because you don't want the potato to crunch. You want it to be nicely cooked. So I do have my oven preheating right now to 380 degrees, okay? So we're gonna chop all our potatoes about, I wanna say, 1/4 of an inch. So nice and thin. As you can see, the pieces are nice, oopsie, thin slices, okay? Voila, there we go. We've got our layer of potatoes, thinly cut, nicely covering the bottom of the pan. Now all we do is we're going to add a little bit of ground pepper. It's good to spice each layer because that way all the flavor comes through it, so it's not just on top or on one side. A little bit of salt. And my favorite, Greek meal is not complete without using dried oregano. A little bit of the oregano. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this in the oven for 20 minutes. And we're going to continue with the other vegetables. So now for our next vegetables. Because the zucchini and the eggplant do tend to shrink a little bit, I have a bigger baking dish to bake these in. Again, we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna add about a tablespoon or 2 of olive oil to coat the bottom. We don't want it to be oily. The whole point is to make it healthier. I like to do the zucchini as the second layer. Same thing, just cut the ends. Again, like we mentioned before, they're all washed and dried. So you're again gonna make skinny slices. About that. And we're going to fill this larger pan. So we're just gonna fill the pan. We're going to spice, add our salt and pepper. I used 4 zucchini. So estimate, depending on the size, to have 4 to 6. And then as you're cutting them, you'll see how much you're going to need just to fill the one pan up. And for the potatoes, it was 7 potatoes, but again, depending on size, it could be a little bit more, could be a little bit less. So just have a few more that you wash and have them ready to go. There we go. And this again, how long? 20 minutes. You got it, in the oven. And again, our final one is our eggplant. So again, we're going to put 1 to 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and we are going to cut it a nice thin size, okay? I always like to do the eggplant last. Many people do it differently, only because these are bigger pieces. So when it sits on top, all the vegetables, and you actually put your ground beef mix that we'll be working on later, it won't fall in between and all the vegetables will actually sit on top like a layer. We're gonna put our spices on here. Just a little bit of our ground pepper and salt. That way we have flavor in each layer as we go. And again, of course, oregano. So that's it for our vegetables. And how long are we gonna put it in for? That's right, 20 minutes. Let's do it. So our vegetables have cooked for the 20 minutes, but as you can see, they're still white on the one side. So what we're doing is I'm flipping them, and we're gonna put them back in the oven for another 5 to 10 minutes. Just watch them so they can get just a little bit golden, and you want some of that moisture to be taken out of them so our moussaka doesn't become all mushy. So I'm browning the meat. As you can see, it's beautiful. Going to put 2 medium onions. Right now in this meat, I actually have 3 pounds of ground beef. For the recipe, you only need 2. The reason I have 3 is because I'm actually going to be doing a smaller gluten-free version. And I'll talk about that a little bit later too. Add our spices. We have nice, beautiful flavors in each of the layers. So, of course, oregano. It's probably a good 2 teaspoons that I put in there. And then for salt, probably again, in the meat, you want to really salt it and salt and pepper well. So another 1 to 2 teaspoons. Of course, it's to taste, so it's preference also how much you want. And pepper, I guess. I just kind of watch the flakes fall down. So nice when the ground beef, you know, that initial smell isn't as exciting, but then when the onions go in, the spices go in, and it's just, you get that beautiful aroma. It's absolutely wonderful right now. See, the onions are beautifully incorporated. And so my little twist to the moussaka is I do like to add a little bit of a tomato base to it. So I have measured up 1 cup of a tomato sauce. Now the last ingredient, anyone that's been following my channel when I'm actually doing any type of cooking of meals, is my fresh dill. I love dill. Oregano and dill are my trademarks in most of my meals. So I have 2 tablespoons. Our meat is ready. So we're gonna put that aside, and we're gonna continue with our last layer, which is the bechamel sauce. So now for the creamy part of this delicious meal, our beautiful bechamel sauce. So right now, I have melted half a cup of butter. Once it's completely melted, it doesn't need to bubble, you just need it to melt. So I'm adding 6 tablespoons of flour. So you want to keep whisking this and whisking it together. You want your milk to be either you're going to warm it up or you want it at room temperature. So when I even started to chop the vegetables and get all that done, I actually measured 6 cups of milk. So I have it at room temperature, ready to go. Otherwise, if it's a step I've forgotten, I do warm it up a little bit. You can see the consistency, it's already a nice thickness. We're gonna let it bubble for another minute. Turn it down to medium, because we're going to start adding our milk. Now, my butter is salted, so I'm not gonna add any salt and I'm not adding any spices at all. It's the butter, the flour, and our milk. You have all your other spices in your vegetables and in your meat, so we don't need to add anything else. This is that creaminess that we're going to have on top. Now we're going to add our milk a little bit at a time. If you've never done anything like this, this will bubble. So stir, 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 stir. Oopsie. As it thickens very quickly each time. I keep adding a little bit more of the milk. Stir, stir, stir. Whisk it up well. And again, we keep adding more of the milk. It gets really, really nice and thick every time you add your milk. And once all the milk is incorporated, you can increase your heat to medium-high, between medium and high. So that way it can come to boil the rest. To do that last bit of thickening. Then you keep adding about half a cup to 3/4 of a cup at a time. So while I'm waiting this to come to a slight boil, as far as the gluten-free version of this, so the only thing you would substitute is the flour. You would use a 1-to-1 ratio type gluten-free flour. And you'll get the same thing. It's still going to thicken, the same thing. Just do your measurements accordingly with the butter and your flour and your milk. So we brought it almost to the consistency of like a pudding, like a custard. So it's still a little bit runny. Once it sits, it's actually going to thicken a lot more, and as it cooks also in the moussaka, it's going to thicken more. So you don't want to overdo it. So here comes the fun part where we put everything all together. So I did take my spatula and just loosen the potatoes and kind of had to readjust it again. They were in the oven for an additional 20 minutes. Potatoes take a little bit longer to cook, but the zucchini and the eggplant was 20 minutes initially. We flipped them and we did another 10 minutes because they're a thinner, more lighter vegetable, okay? So now these should be cooler because I did take them out. All we're gonna do is take them and do the layer of our zucchini. And now our final of the vegetable layer is our eggplant. Now I'm gonna bring the meat over and I'll show you what we're gonna do with that. So here's my little secret to making the meat part also a little bit creamy is I actually take some of the bechamel sauce and I put it in the meat. So usually about 3/4 of a cup. I'm just gonna put it in and stir it up. It just adds a little additional creaminess to the meat itself. There we go. Look at that. So you can see that creaminess, the white is in it. So it's definitely beautiful. So now all we do is dump it on top. Cover it nice and beautifully over our vegetables. Make a nice even little layer. These are one of these kind of meals that you feel it's like a masterpiece because you have all these layers going, you know, like if you're painting different layers and it all comes together. That's how I feel when I'm making moussaka. We're painting a beautiful dinner. Our final thing to add is the rest of our sauce. So the more this sits, the more it thickens, and sometimes it causes a bit of a crust. Don't worry about it, no big deal. Just give it a nice little whisk and it incorporates in again, okay? So all we're gonna do now is just dump this on top. And as you can see, it is thick, but not extremely where you can't pour it. So it looks really beautiful. Try to move all the custard all the way around. As you can see, it's thickening, it's barely moving. So we're gonna put it in the oven for 30 minutes. Watch it for the next 15 minutes. See you soon with the finished product. So here we are. We have both the regular one and our gluten-free version. So as you can see, they both look very similar. This one got a little more goldeny darker. But basically you broil it for between 5 to 10 minutes. So you need to really keep an eye on it. Obviously I kind of allowed a couple minutes more than maybe I should have, but it's gonna be delicious. So for those that need the gluten-free, you have the option to enjoy this beautiful moussaka in a gluten-free version. And it's good to kind of let it sit when you bring it out, only that it's a lot easier to cut too. Okay. Using some of our sauce. There we go. You can see all the layers there. Smell the aroma, it's absolutely amazing. So let's try this delicious moussaka. A little bit of everything. A little bit of meat, the potato, the zucchini, the eggplant. Ooh. The flavors are amazing. It just comes together all so beautifully. So please, my dear friends, give it a thumbs up, share the recipe, subscribe to the channel. I know when you make this, your family is going to love it. A healthy, delicious moussaka. I'm Elena, and thank you so much for watching Made with Yiayia. Opa!